Warning, the show you are about to watch is very, very naughty. They talk about scary movies and frightening stuff and other really inappropriate things, and it's only appropriate for people over the age of 18, and frankly, even they shouldn't watch it, and if you keep watching, I wash my hands of the whole thing.
Monsters, Midian, mockumentaries, and an overabundance of heavily armed Canadians. It's all coming up on this episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Good evening and welcome to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, PBDC TV's place for a fun conversation about horror movies. I'm your host, Steve the Cat. Tonight's show is all about monsters, but not just any monsters. Tonight, we're going to look at a pair of films from two different eras that are centered on entire communities of monsters and the societies that they created for themselves. Also, we're giving Guinevere and Professor Fluffosaurus the night off because we're debuting a brand new feature on tonight's show. We've had a lot of fun this season watching old horror movies from the VHS era. Watching all of these new movies gave us an idea. The streaming generation may not be able to relate to this, but for those of us who are old enough, we remember going to Blockbuster or the local video rental store and hitting the horror movie section on a Friday night. The thing is, back in those days, you didn't always know what you were getting. It's not like today where you have a subscription so you can start streaming a film and then bail out if you don't like it. In those days, you had to make a decision just based upon what you could tell from the description on the box. You would pick out something that looked interesting, take it home, and if it was awful, you were pretty much stuck with it. So, to recapture the feeling of going to the video rental store, we're going to start doing something new on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat called Blind Box Specials. What this means is that from time to time, we're going to pick out a film from the VHS era that we have never seen before and just put it on the schedule without previewing it. So we're committing to do a review based upon our first ever viewing of the film, and here's the tricky part, we're committing to use that review in the show no matter how bad the movie turns out to be. Now, we're not going to do this every week, but we will do it from time to time, starting with tonight's show. Now, I knew this would be tricky when we first decided to do it, but it ended up being even trickier than I thought. A lot of great old horror movies came out back in the VHS era, but there were also a lot of really bad ones. When we decided to start doing blind box specials, I guess I had forgotten just how bad some of those old films could be. So tonight, in addition to our featured film reviews, you're going to see how we deal with the really bad blind box specials. And with that, we're gonna get the show started. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're really glad that you're here. Now sit back and relax because here we go. You were promised a new segment in tonight's show, and here it is. Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat presents Theater of Failure. I'm Steve the Cat, and I will be your host for this segment. So you may be asking yourself, what is Theater of Failure? Well, go back to what we talked about during the introduction of this episode. We're going to start doing something called blind box specials, where we pick out some VHS era films that we have never seen and commit to using them in the show and reviewing them, regardless of how good or bad they end up being. Now, when I put that idea in motion, it did not occur to me just how bad some of these films are. So, early on in the process, I did a film that was just so bad, and I mean so bad. We only do 2 featured film reviews a week, and I could not, in good conscience, justify using one of those for this film. On the other hand, the rules of the challenge were that I had to use it in every episode, so for those films that are just too awful to use in a featured film review, we have created Theater of Failure. Tonight we will be talking about this film right here. This film is called Sledgehammer. It was released in the year 1983. It is a slasher serial killer film, and the fact that the movie from 1983 feels the need to tell you that it is made in color should tell you right off the bat that it's a very bad sign. If you look in that poster, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner it says in color. I grew up watching the original Spider-Man cartoons in syndication, and yes, they all started out saying they were in color. Those were made in 1967, not in 1983. Color was very, 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 very commonplace by 1983, I can tell you from having been there. So what should you expect if you are unfortunate enough to watch the film Sledgehammer? You should expect an unbearable serial killer film from the early 80s about a guy killing people with a sledgehammer, which you probably could have worked that out from the title. Well, I think that's what it's about. Actually, I am not sure exactly what happened, and there is no way I'm going to watch it again to fill in the blanks. The story is very confusing, very poorly told, and some of the sound quality is so bad that you cannot understand what anyone is saying. This film may cause headaches, nausea, vomiting, and depression. Air sickness bags are recommended. Now at this point you're thinking, Steve is exaggerating. Steve is pulling my leg about how bad this film is. Oh yeah? Take a look at this.
Johnny, what is it? Oh, shit. Listen to me, Johnny. You have to go upstairs and get Jimmy and Carol. Can you do that for me? Don't tell them anything. Just bring them down here, but don't tell them anything. Can you do that? Can you? Okay, go.
Wasn't that special? Folks, that goes on for 87 minutes. Yes, I sat through 87 minutes of that. I took the bullet, so you do not have to. You can thank me later. So let's quickly summarize the film Sledgehammer. In this film, a horribly unattractive mother locks her son in the closet so she can fool around with her lover undisturbed, as rational people are wont to do. So her son gets out of the closet and kills them both with a sledgehammer, as sane, rational people are wont to do. 10 years later, a group of teens rent out the house for a weekend party, which is about the only realistic thing that happens in the movie, the fact that teenagers sometimes will rent out a house for a party. The ghost of the little boy kills most of them. I think. It's not real clear to me if this is the ghost of the little boy or what. Sometimes he's a little boy, sometimes he's a full-grown man, he transitions between, there's dimensional doorways, and I don't know what the hell was going on. Anyway, one interesting point about this film, it was one of the first horror movies to be shot on video instead of film. Now, it is not the first, but it is among the first, and I've got a note that I took when I was watching this film that it has Commodore 64 quality opening graphics, and I did not realize at the time that this was one of the first horror films ever done on video. So the opening graphics, which are really terrible, kind of makes sense in that context. So normally at this part of the review, we would talk about the things I like about the film and things that could have been done better, but come on, that's just ridiculous to try to force that template on top of this film. So we're just going to talk about a few points of how bad it is. Well, the 1983 video technology looks as bad on screen as you would imagine. Oh, it's horrible. It's like looking at something through stained glass. It's so blurry and so bad. The characters are unbearable. The acting is unbearable. You want everyone to die, which is kind of an accomplishment because how do you take a character that is so completely undeveloped and one-dimensional and yet make me really, really, really want to see them die? The story makes no sense, and, most interestingly, the running time of the film is listed as 87 minutes. But I would be surprised if they shot more than 45 minutes of video. What happens is the filmmakers pad the film out by stretching out every trivial little scene into an extended adventure in slow motion video. Now, you think I'm making that up. Really? Well, let's take a look at this little bit from the opening kill of the film. wasn't that great, but lest you think I'm just cherry-picking one incident, let's take a look from a scene soon after the teens first arrive at the house. Yes, folks, that goes on for about 4.5 minutes. So let's get to the scorecard for this film. Kills, I counted 8. Bare breasts, I counted 1. Can't touch thises, I counted 3. So there's 3 separate incidents of people being whacked with a sledgehammer. So the killer does not use a sledgehammer exclusively, although it is his preferred weapon. In snappinating, yes, one character gets her head turned around backwards. And new one for Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, fellatio interruptus. Yes, you have one case of that, and if you can't figure out what that means, ask your older brother or sister to explain it to you. So the final word on Sledgehammer, 0 paws out of 4. Do not engage unless you are intentionally seeking out something terrible. Now, there are some people that just crave terrible movies, and if that's you, then this one's right in your wheelhouse. But otherwise, do not engage. This movie is available free with ads on Tubi. Do not fall for it. Watch something else. Just a few of the notes that I took on this film. Number 1, this is one of those films that riff tracks would avoid. And I mean that literally. I heard an interview with Mike Nelson many years ago when he was still with Mystery Science Theater 3000, and he said outright, some of the films they watch are so bad that they literally cannot use them. This is one of those kinds of films. Number 2, this makes Rocktober Blood look like Spielberg. Yes, we did Rocktober Blood last year. I kind of liked it, but I liked it ironically. This film I couldn't even enjoy ironically. And finally, the only explanation for this film is cocaine, but they're also lethargic. So, that's the final word on Sledgehammer, our Theater of Failure feature for the week. I am Steve the Cat. Thank you for joining me.
And now it's time for our featured film reviews.
You know, most of my colleagues would have walked away from a case like yours. But I found you intriguing. All that talk about monsters and Midian.
Only I didn't create them. Heard about them from other people.
Yeah, but you incorporated it into your private mythology.
I guess I did. I needed a place to escape to.
A place where all your sins would be forgiven.
Yeah.
Do you remember what sins?
What do you mean?
Well, when you imagine yourself being taken away to this invented city, to Midian, what sins were you going to be forgiven?
Are we back in therapy, Doctor? They were just dreams. Midian doesn't exist. Monsters don't exist.
But murder does, Aaron. Murder is very, very real. It might start in the mind, but then it changes to flesh and blood. 2 days ago, the police brought me some photographs. They wanted to know if any of my patients was capable of doing what's in those photographs. I'm going to show them to you.
Let's get into our first featured film review for the evening. We're going to talk about this film right here. We are going to talk about a film called Nightbreed. And more specifically, we are talking about the director's cut of Nightbreed that was just brought out by Shout Factory a few years ago. Different from the theatrical release of this film. I'll be honest, I have not seen the theatrical release, so I cannot compare the two. Nightbreed, at least at the time I'm recording this, available free with ads on Tubi. This is a horror fantasy film that was released in the year 1990, directed by Clive Barker, written by Clive Barker, based upon a novella by Clive Barker, and the cast includes Craig Schieffer, Ann Bobby, and David Cronenberg. Yes, that David Cronenberg. And before we go any farther, yes, this is a blind box special, to my great shame. I had never seen the film Nightbreed before I sat down and watched the director's cut on Tubi a few weeks ago. We're going to talk in a bit about how when this film came out, the studio had no idea what to do with it and how to market it, so it did not do well in its theatrical release because the way it was sold by the studio did not necessarily bear a lot of resemblance to what the film really was. I think I was a victim of that as much as anybody else. I thought this was just a stupid slasher film. Oh my goodness, it is not. It is so much more. Let's get into setting your expectations for this film. So, what you should expect if you watch the Nightbreed director's cut is an epic VHS-era dark fantasy horror film that combines elements of creature feature, slasher film, supernatural horror, and fantasy. There's really nothing like it. I've had a very hard time coming up with other films that are in a similar vein, and what I finally decided is that if you like Hellraiser, or if you like a movie like Lord of Illusions, you'll probably like Nightbreed. Nightbreed is... It defies categorization. It does not fit into any one box, and so it's kind of hard to come up with something that's comparable. So, let's get into calibrating your expectations. If you're going to watch Nightbreed, this is the scale we like to use. On the far left side of the scale, very campy films, such as Jason X. On the far right side of the scale, very serious films, such as The Silence of the Lambs. This scale is not an assessment of the quality of the film. This scale is an assessment of what your mindset needs to be going into the film if you're going to maximize your enjoyment of it. Nightbreed, you pretty much have to be right down the middle. Now, on one hand, this is not a comedy. It does not really have a lot of jokes to it. No winking at the camera, no breaking the fourth wall, so you can't say it's a campy film. On the other hand, it has so many fantasy elements to it that you can't really say it's uber realistic either. So it's pretty much right down the middle. It's kind of a mainstream theatrical release. It's epic in scope. It's a horror movie instead of a science fiction movie or a historical drama. So before we go any farther, let's get into our vocabulary lesson for this film. This, of course, is the part of the show where we discuss new and innovative words and phrases in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that are trying to ban our conversation. Those bots and algorithms are always evolving, and therefore we must evolve our language as well. 2 terms for this film. First is executive overreach. Executive overreach is a slang expression for a demonstration of police excessive force or police overkill in a horror film. This is not intended as a political commentary on the current climate. If you watch this film, you will understand why this has to be part of it. There are a couple of incidents of just unbelievable police overkill in this film. Second term is insnapinate. This has been around since season 1, but just to review, insnapinate is a verb that means to quickly rotate a character's head by 180 degrees while leaving the rest of the body in its original orientation, and colloquial forms of this term include hoot owling and Linda blaring. Please keep these terms in mind. They will become important later in the episode. So let's get into a film summary. In this film takes place in Calgary. In Calgary, a young man named Aaron Boone, who suffers from psychiatric issues, continually dreams of a land called Midian, a place where monsters live and are accepted. Boone's psychiatrist, Dr. Decker, who, by the way, is secretly a serial killer, convinces Boone that he is responsible for Decker's murders. Boone runs away to find Midian and succeeds in finding it, because he thinks, well, I'm a serial killer, I'm a monster, let me go live amongst the monsters. But the monsters will not accept him because he is an innocent human. This is when Boone finds out that, hey, you didn't actually kill those people. Decker convinced you killed those people, but you did not. The police track down Boone, and then Dr. Decker tricks the police into believing Boone is armed and Boone is gunned down. And when I say gunned down, it's one of those situations where the police let loose, 1 to 200 rounds of ammunition at one guy who does not even have a weapon visible. And they probably hit him like 7 times because that's the way this stuff goes. At the local shooting range down the street from me, a lot of law enforcement personnel use that range, and I am just astounded at how poorly they shoot. Anyway, Boone returns from the dead, of course, and journeys back to Midian, where he is now accepted among the Society of Monsters because, he's now undead. Dr. Decker eventually deduces that Boone is still alive, at least sort of, and becomes obsessed with tracking down and destroying Boone and the monsters of Midian. Now, if you've seen this film and you're unhappy with my summarization of it, let me say right up front, this film is very creative, it is very complex, it is very original, and it is very difficult to summarize in one slide. This is kind of like trying to summarize the entire Hunger Games trilogy in one sentence. It's kind of difficult. There's just a lot to this film. So let's get into our villain profile. Well, first, we're going to talk about the monsters of Midian. There you see one of them there. Here you see another one, and we've also got a video clip. Check this out.
I came to be with you.
No. Sorry. I can smell innocence. At 50 yards.
I've killed people. I've killed 15 people.
Who told you that?
What do you mean?
He lied, asshole. You're natural. And that means you're meat for the beast.
So these belong to various classes. Basically, every monster of Midian seems to be a different, unique individual. Special powers? Well, Midian is populated by many different species of monster, each with unique strengths, weaknesses, and powers, so they're all different. Signature weapons include, but are not limited to, claws, teeth, the ability to transform into smoke, and poisonous quills. Now, it's not that one creature has all of those powers. Different creatures have different powers. That's just a collection of some of them that you will see in this film. But there is so much more to this film. Are the monsters really the villain? Or is the villain Dr. Philip Decker? There you see Dr. Philip Decker in his serial killer garb, and I have to say, that is, in my opinion, the best serial killer horror movie mask ever. I had never seen this movie before a couple of weeks ago, but my goodness, that mask is fantastic. Dr. Decker is of the slasher serial killer class. His special powers include the ability to manipulate others by using his expertise in the human mind. Also, he's stealthy and proficient with bladed weapons. And his signature weapon is an extremely long single-edged knife that you can kind of see in that top picture. It's almost machete length, but I wouldn't call it a machete. It is made for stabbing. So let's talk about some of the things I liked about this film right off the bat. The film is just epic. It's epic in ambition, it's epic in scope, it is epic in creativity. The makers of this film, Clive Barker and the people that worked with him, went into it with the idea that they were going to create the equivalent of Star Wars for horror movies, and so they were obviously swinging at the fences with this one. The film is inventive, original, creative, and enjoyable. It's just a very different kind of horror film. Although the film defies categorization, it combines elements of creature feature, slasher film, and supernatural horror with elements of fantasy, so it's a mashup of a lot of different things. And the film uses plentiful practical special effects for the various monsters of Midian, some of which you saw a moment ago. Things that could have been better about this film. Well, right off the bat, the first half is a bit slow. I'm looking at my notes, and I specifically wrote a note that says, I am 44 minutes in, and it's been pretty slow. Now, understand that the director's cut of this film is 2 hours long, so 44 minutes is not even halfway through. In my opinion, this movie improves significantly in the second half, but the first half, probably a little slower than I would have liked. The film tries to pack way too much into its 2-hour length, which makes it feel disjointed, as if large segments were cut out. It's like they tried to adapt a huge series of literary works into one 2-hour film, and they just couldn't fit it all in, and it just makes the movie feel like large pieces of it are missing, which, whether this is true or not, makes it feel like it was poorly edited and that pieces were cut out that shouldn't have been cut out, and It's unfortunate that the execution of the film does not match the epic ambition that they set out with when they went to make this film. By combining so many different genres into one single film, the film feels like it changes gears into a completely different story several different times as the movie goes on. It seems to take several different turns and turn into several completely different kinds of stories at different points along the way. Some of the practical special effects aged more gracefully than others. Some of them look pretty good still, even now in 2022. Some of them, not so much. Now, understand this movie is over 30 years old, so you've got to grade it on the curve. The film is original and complex, and it may be too dense for a casual fan just looking for some scares. So if you and your friends are just looking at something light and scary to have on TV while you munch popcorn and have some drinks, this is probably not the best choice. This is the kind of film that you want to really focus on and just kind of immerse yourself into. It's not the kind of thing that you do while you're also chatting with your friends or that you watch while you're also scrolling on your phone. And finally, the end of the film was too obvious in its attempt to set up a sequel. Actually, in its attempt to set up 2 sequels, when Clive Barker put this together, he originally intended for there to be 3 films total. And it just feels a little ham-fisted. Now, it does not feel like some films where they feel like it ends on a note of to be continued. There definitely is some closure and conclusion and resolution to the end of this film, but it also is too obviously trying to set up the next chapter of the story, and to my knowledge those never materialized, so it felt a little ham-fisted. So let's get to Steve's scorecard for this film. Kills. Take a deep breath, everybody. I counted an estimated 44 plus many, many more. The entire final act of this film is quite literally a war, and I won't say it's impossible to get a good count, but I will say that it will require more time and effort than I am able to invest in one film to get an accurate count. Bare breasts, I counted 5. Possumings, I counted 2. Denogganings, again I counted 2. Pez dispenserings, again I counted 2. Infuegoinatings, 1. M80ings / sandblastings, I counted 2. Now, what do I mean by that? M80ing is a vocabulary word from a while back that involves basically blowing a character up with explosives such as dynamite. Sandblasting is a term from this season, from a few episodes back, where an undead creature bursts into dust because it's been exposed to sunlight. I am not sure exactly which of these terms is more applicable to the 2 explosions in this film, but there are 2 scenes in this film where a monster explodes into dust, and so it is somewhere in the vicinity of an M80ing or a sandblasting. Death snoggings, kissing somebody and then sucking out their life force. There's one of those. Ensnappinatings, yes, there is one hoot owling in this film. And executive overreaches. There are 2. I talked about the police shooting already. There's also an excessive police beatdown in this film. Plus, the entire final act of this film is just a massive, massive undertaking in police overreach. With your viewing of Nightbreed, you also get some bonus features. Let's talk about a few of those. You get a David Cronenberg sighting. Yes, he actually has a very big part in this film. I've never thought of David Cronenberg as an actor, other than the little cameos I've seen him make in films like Jason X. David Cronenberg, of course, is famous as a director of things like the remake of The Fly, among others. You get a live band performance that goes on way too long. And it goes on way too long for a crowd with no sense of rhythm. I'm sorry, these people require hospitalization because their sense of rhythm is just broken. You get head-peeling action. You get matte paintings worthy of the original Star Trek series. That is not a compliment. You get a monster that looks like the Mac Tonight guy from those old McDonald's commercials. Now, some of us old-timers remember those commercials. If you're younger, you may not. Google it. You get a Calgary Stampeders pennant sighting. Yes, this is a Canadian film. You get a 1954 Vauxhall Wyvern sighting. Yeah, I don't know if Vauxhalls were ever sold in North America. I don't believe they were ever sold in the U.S. Maybe some were exported to Canada. It's more of a European brand. This one is right-hand drive, but you got a nice 1954 Vauxhall right-hand drive car in this film. Well, I mean, it's kind of patinaed, it's kind of rusted out and such, but it is an unusual car to see. You get a bunch of Canadians with enough firepower to invade Berlin. Oh my goodness, where did the Canadians get all of these guns? It is guns, guns, and more guns. You get priest punching action. You get exploding cemetery action. And finally, you get many, many, many cryptic conversations. This was one of my problems with the first half of the film and why I thought it was a little slow. There were just a lot of cryptic conversations, and I specifically wrote a note down that they seem to think anything that sounds cryptic is automatically deep. It's not. If you power through that, the movie gets, in my opinion, much better in the second half. So Steve's final score for this film, we're going to give it 3 paws out of 4. We're going to say this is a VHS era classic that was unsuccessful at the time of release because it defies categorization and the studio had no idea how to market it. They tried to sell this as a slasher film. It is not a slasher film. There is a little bit of a slasher film embedded in the film, but there's so much more to it, and so that just did not work as a way to market the film. Honestly, I don't know if this is one of those films that would do well in a mainstream release, regardless of how you market it, just because it brings so many different things together. You know, a horror fan is really going to love this film, but I don't know that this is something that's going to work as a mainstream theatrical release. It is ambitious, it is epic in scope, and epic in creativity, but inexpertly adapted and a bit confusing in execution. And, just my opinion, but I think this would work great as a 10-episode series on a streaming service. So if HBO or Amazon Prime or Netflix wanted to do a 10-episode adaptation of Nightbreed, maybe they could do 3 seasons of it and do adaptations of everything Clive Barker wanted to do for 3 films. I think that would work a lot better than trying to cram everything into a 2-hour movie. I just think doing, 8 to 10 episodes of it would make it a lot more coherent. But that is my opinion. Your mileage may vary, but regardless, that is Steve's final score for Nightbreed.
And now a word from our delightful benefactors at PBDC TV, your nightly heartbeat of horror.
This is Mikey from Out of the Ordinary, and you're watching PBDC TV.
First thing in the morning, when I'm listening to music and getting a little bit of time for some creepy research, I'm always representing with my PBDC merch. What a better way to have a cup of coffee in the morning.
Don't forget to check out our other cool merch at rootsbleedred.com. That's rootsbleedred.com.
This is Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus from Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, and when I'm not hosting Monster Chat or knocking down small Japanese cities, I'm watching PBDC TV. Now back to the show.
My name is Adam Green. As a filmmaker who has had some success in the horror genre, can we just do this with graphics?
No, just keep going.
I've made movies like Frozen, the Hatchet franchise, Spiral. I have a TV series called Holliston. With that comes a very loyal and cult fan base. So stop, I feel like a big enough douche and you keep laughing at me. You get to meet some very unique people. Like, people will mail stuff. This Victor Crowley maquette that somebody made. This fan's underwear. This bottle of pills that somebody sent. Really cool stuff, like artwork that people will make for us, which is awesome. There was this one guy, William Decker. I wish that I had thought to be shooting this the moment that this stuff first arrived, but...
Say it!
Okay, all right. William Decker claims, in all seriousness, that he's found monsters. And he wants me to tell his story to the world. Is that good enough?
Let's get into our final featured film review for the evening. We are going to talk about this film right here. It is called Digging Up the Marrow. Now, this is a horror comedy mockumentary released in the year 2014 in the UK for a film festival. Then it had its general release in the USA in 2015. This is directed by Adam Green, who directed the Hatchet franchise. And the cast includes Adam Green, Ray Wise, and it has cameo appearances by numerous horror icons. So let's get into setting your expectations for this film. What you should expect is a horror comedy mockumentary in which real-life director Adam Green searches out the existence of real monsters. Now, I will tell you right off the bat, this is not the kind of film we normally do on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Now, this is a horror movie. It has horror movie elements, and it is absolutely designed to appeal to the horror movie audience. So from that point of view, it is a perfect fit with this show. As we get into the scorecard, you'll see that it's not the kind of film we normally do, but I wanted to include this film in tonight's episode for several reasons. First of all, I think it's a pretty good film, and I'm not sure if everyone's aware of it, so I want to make sure people know about this film. Number two, it makes a good companion piece for a film like Nightbreed, which is about a community of monsters. And number three, frankly, we've already talked about two more conventional horror movies tonight, so I thought if we're doing 3 movie reviews, we can stand to do one that's a little different from what we normally do. So, if you like Hatchet, if you like Nightbreed, you might like Digging Up the Marrow. Also, if you like found footage dark comedies like They're Watching, a movie we reviewed first season on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, you might like Digging Up the Marrow. Let's get into calibrating your sights for this film. This is the scale we like to use. On the far left side of the scale, very campy films such as Jason X. On the far right side of the scale, very serious films such as The Silence of the Lambs. As always, this scale is not an assessment of the quality of the film. This scale indicates what your mindset needs to be going into the film in order to maximize your enjoyment. You don't want to go into a comedy thinking it's going to be serious or vice versa, because that can ruin your appreciation of the film. Digging Up the Marrow is a horror comedy, but it does have some serious elements to it, so it's definitely on the left side of the spectrum, but it is not completely campy, silly, stupid. It does try to be realistic. It is a mockumentary, so it is trying to look like something that could really happen. Before we go any farther, of course, we need to get into a vocabulary lesson. This, of course, is the part of the show where we discuss new and innovative words and phrases in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that are always trying to ban our conversation. The algorithms and bots are always evolving, thus our language must continue to evolve. Only one term for this film, and it's, again, different from what we normally do on this show, but we're going to talk about a word called catastrophe. What's a catastrophe? That is a noun referring to the situation or the act in filmmaking of making a casting decision that later turns out to be inopportune, inappropriate, embarrassing, or disastrous. This includes, but is not limited to, decisions such as casting Kevin Spacey as a main character in a feature film, then having to reshoot all of his scenes with a new actor right before release because inappropriate behavior that everybody knew about finally came to light. So that is catastrophe. Please keep this term in mind. It will become important later in the episode. Let's get into a film summary for Digging Up the Marrow. This is a mockumentary in which director Adam Green, who, as we said, directed and created the Hatchet franchise, appearing as himself, begins work on a documentary about artwork that features monsters. During the course of filming, he receives a package from William Decker, a retired police detective who claims to have evidence of the existence of real monsters. And I want you to notice right away, the police detective's name is William Decker. The psychiatrist in Nightbreed was named Decker. I do not believe this to be coincidence. Unsure whether Decker is sincere or a hoaxer, but intrigued by the idea of documenting the existence of real monsters, Adam takes a cameraman with him and travels to meet Detective Decker. The search for evidence leads them into contact with an underground world that Detective Decker has named the Marrow. What lives in the Marrow? Well, that leads us to our villain profile for this film. So we are going to talk about monsters. They don't really have names. They're all unique. They're all different. Detective Decker has some names for all of them, but I'll let you watch the film and see that. They belong to the class of subterranean mutants. Their special powers are unknown and or unclear. And their signature weapon, well, the thing about this film is each monster is unique in appearance, ability, and temperament. All of them are based upon the mind-bending artwork of Alex Pardee. So just to give you kind of an idea of what you're in for, here's some sketches by Alex Pardee. And at least one of these creatures, appears in the film. And then here's a shot from the actual film, kind of a person with spider legs growing out of his back. Every monster is different. Every monster is unique. So things I liked about this film. It's inventive, and it's a fascinating concept for a found footage mockumentary style film. The use of a real director, his real friends, his real crew, and a number of real horror movie icons gives the film a feel of authenticity that is lacking in other found footage films. You will see plenty of people you recognize in this film playing themselves, so it seems like you're watching a real documentary. The creature concepts that we just looked at are creative and unusual. The film relies on practical special effects. If you are familiar with the Hatchet series, you know that Adam Green is big into using the practical special effects, and all the monsters in this film are done with practical special effects. And finally, the film is light with a comedic touch, but the scary parts feature real tension and real scares. Now, going back to a film I mentioned earlier, the found footage film They're Watching. That was a found footage comedy, but the thing I liked about it is it kept the scary parts scary and the funny parts funny, and it really didn't let the two cross over with each other. This film is kind of similar. You have parts that are light and then you have parts that are scary. Let's take a look at one of those more scary scenes.
Guys.
Did you get it? Did you see I got it. It came right at me. Here, take this.
Okay, so this leads to things that could have been better. Well, this is not a straight-up horror movie. It's more a mockumentary with a bit of horror thrown in at the end. So what that means is that if you're the kind of person that needs a lot of action or a high kill count, look elsewhere. This is not the film for you. Also, casting a recognizable actor as Decker punctures the film's bubble of being otherwise realistic. Going all the way back to the first season of this show, we have talked about found footage films and the fact that the use of unknown actors and actresses is not a bug, it's a feature because it prevents a familiar face from interfering with your suspension of disbelief. In this case, you know right away that Detective Decker is an actor. It's Ray Wise. It's somebody that you've seen before. Even if the name doesn't ring a bell, the face will. Interestingly, long after I took my notes on this film and started putting this review together, I read some more information about it and discovered that Adam Green intentionally wanted to use a recognizable actor as Detective Decker, specifically to make the point to the audience that, hey, I am not trying to sell this as a true story. This is a work of fiction. Even though it's made to look like a real documentary, we're telling you, without telling you, right up front, that it is a piece of fiction. So in that respect, it's different from something like The Blackwell Ghost, which is a piece of fiction but is designed to look like it is a real documentary. So, I'll tell him that he was successful. It did puncture the film's bubble of being otherwise realistic, but that's what he was going for, so mission accomplished. Adam Green's continual smirking and snarkiness gets tiresome. He's a director, he's not an actor. The action doesn't really get going until the final 20 minutes. That is often par for the course in found footage films, so that's nothing that you're not going to deal with in any number of other found footage films. The use of practical special effects with found footage style video, not entirely successful. Some of it looks really cool, some of it looks kind of iffy. And finally, at the end of the film, you will be left with a lot of loose ends, a lot of unresolved questions. Now, maybe you'll like that, maybe you won't like that. If you're the kind of person that needs resolution and closure, it might bother you. If you're the kind of person who thinks it's really cool to have some loose threads at the end that you and your friends can talk about after you've watched the movie and discuss different theories, you'll enjoy this. But you have things like Decker has a mysterious storage room, and at the end of the film, you kind of have a vague idea of what was going on down there, but not precisely. There is some sort of weird relationship between Decker and the Marrow, and you think you kind of have some idea of what that is, but you never find out exactly. So it leaves you with a lot of things that you and your friends can debate, and you'll have to decide whether or not that's something you enjoy doing. So let's get into Steve's scorecard for this film, and here is where you will see how this film is different from the films we normally do on this show. Kills. 1, and that is off screen, and that's in a story. So basically, this is a horror movie with no kills. Bare breasts. Well, none. Now, actress Riley Vanderbilt does have a role in this film, and she does sleep topless, but she does sleep face down. So you don't get to see the goodies, but you do get a pretty good look at her rear end. Denogginings. None. Possumings. None. Car or foot chases. You get 1. Jump scares. I counted at least 4. There's some pretty good jump scares in this film. And catastrophe. The recurring appearance of Riley Vanderbilt, the actress, who at the time this movie was filmed, was Adam's real-life wife, but the two divorced before the film was completed. So here you have a film which is intended to look like real life, in which Adam Green has his now ex-wife playing the role of his wife in the film, and he had to do some serious do I want to or do I not want to as when it came down to releasing this film. Do I want to release it? Do I want to redo this and cut her out of the film? You also get a few bonus features with this film. You get mysterious cop action. Detective Decker is very strange. He's very mysterious. He always sounds like he's just ever so slightly spaced out, like he has seen something that has changed him significantly, and the rest of us don't know what has happened to him, but he's just a very cryptic character. You get mysterious storage room action. Yes, Detective Decker has a storage room in his home that is locked, and he won't allow anybody to go near. You get a Kane Hodder sighting. Yes, Jason Voorhees himself does have a cameo appearance in this film as himself. You get a Tom Holland sighting, and that is Tom Holland, the director, not the guy who played Spider-Man, again, playing himself. You get monster spoon-feeding action, and that's not a euphemism, that is literal. You get Detective Decker saying, "Hey, this is my favorite tune." Adam Green asks, "Who is it?" And Detective Decker says, "I don't know." I told you, he's kind of strange. You get naked forced confession action. And finally, you get They Like Pancakes. If you want to know exactly what that means, watch the film. I do recommend this film. So let's get to Steve's final score for this film. I give it 2.5 paws out of 4. I would say it's an extremely original and creative idea, but paired with mediocre execution. I really wanted to like this movie, and I did like it. I just didn't like it as much as I hoped I would like it, and that's not to say it's not worth watching. It's just it didn't quite live up to what I think it could have been. It's worth watching if you like Adam Green. It is worth watching if you like horror comedy mockumentaries like They're Watching. You need to avoid it if you need a lot of action or a lot of kills. If you're looking for something like Halloween Kills or Friday the 13th, this is not the film for you. If you're looking for just something light to watch on the evening and have some laughs and some scares and just kind of enjoy it, this is a pretty good one. So that is Steve's final score for Digging Up the Marrow. That wraps up another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, but before we go, we're going to take just a minute for a few of us to go around the horn and talk about some other things we watched this week. I'm going to go first. This is Steve the Cat. This week I watched a film called Shadow Puppets. This is a creature feature from the year 2007. In this film, a woman wakes up inside what appears to be a padded cell, and she has no memory of who she is or how she got there. She escapes the cell, but then she finds out that she's in an abandoned... Well, she really doesn't know. Is it a hospital? Is it a prison? It's really hard to tell from the inside. So she wanders the facility. And as she wanders the facility, she starts to encounter other people. A total of 8 other people who are in the same situation as her. None of them know who they are. None of them know how they got there. And, bonus, something is stalking them from the shadows. Now, this is a decent but nothing special kind of creature feature. The one interesting thing about this is the cast. This includes the very lovely Jolene Blalock from Star Trek Enterprise. It includes James Marsters, who played Spike on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and the legendary Tony Todd. So, there's better films out there, but it's not bad. It's worth watching if you've just got some time to kill and you're just in the mood for kind of a light creature feature. Anyway, I found this one on Amazon Prime, so that is Shadow Puppets, and now I'm going to hand the mic over to our friend, Crimson Meerkat.
Hello, this is... well, just call me Crimson Meerkat. That's my code name, Crimson Meerkat. I am an expert in all things conspiratorial. I am a credentialed writer. I have published 3 books, and therefore I am an expert, and you must listen to me. And this week, I watched a film called Fear Farm 2. This is a 2021 sequel to the 2020 slasher splatter film, Fear Farm, if you couldn't figure that out from the title. In this film, Melanie recovers consciousness, confused about where she is or how she got there. As she investigates her situation, she finds that she is being held prisoner by the demented Walker family, and that she is not alone. She is on a farm in the midst of a corn maze, which will provide ample opportunity for horror movie shenanigans. The Walker family are using the captives to harvest skin from them to use in their special anti-aging cream. Yes, that was all explained in the movie Fear Farm. Anyway, this is a perfectly middle-of-the-road splatter film. You really do need to watch Fear Farm first to appreciate this one. I mean, I guess you can watch it as a standalone film if you're just interested in the splatter film aspects of it, but if you want to understand what's going on, watch Fear Farm first. Anyway, I found this on Tubi, free with ads, and I gotta tell you something, folks. The real cosmetics industry, much more dangerous than the people that are shown in this film. But I'm already on the wrong side of the Hooters Corporation. I don't want to cross the Mary Kay Corporation as well, so I'm just gonna leave that be for now. And now I'm going to hand the microphone over to our victim of the curse, Carl, the camera monkey.
Good evening. My name is Carl. I am the head writer for this show, and I am also a victim of a curse cast by the loathsome Lavender Harlequin, that loathsome charlatan. You know, normally I do not put a lot of stock in curses and the like, but I gotta say, last week, the folks at Chick-fil-A, the fine folks at Chick-fil-A whom I love, whom I have eaten basically my entire life, got my order wrong. And I cannot think of the last time that ever happened at a Chick-fil-A, so maybe there's something to this. But I'm just going to power through it because otherwise I have to apologize to Lavender Harlequin, and that's just not going to happen. Anyway, this week I watched a film called The Woman. Now, this is a 2011 horror movie, and it turns out that this is a sequel to a 2009 film called Offspring, and there's also a follow-up to this film, I believe it came out in 2019, called Darlin. I had no idea that this film was part of a trilogy or that it was a sequel. I just kind of watched it as a standalone film because it popped up in my recommendations. Anyway, in this film, the woman is a woodland feral cannibal who is the last member of her tribe, because woodland feral cannibals are a real thing in the United States. She is captured by a small-town attorney and family man who is on a hunting trip. And, of course, as people are wont to do, he locks the woman up in his cellar with a plan to civilize her. No, he doesn't turn her over to the police. He does not call social services. He's going to civilize her. Well, as you might guess, the attorney and his seemingly all-American family are not what they appear. And, of course, it would be really unfortunate if the woman were to get loose with an axe to grind against all of these people. Now, I will say, this is a very, very good film, and it can be watched as a standalone film. Like I said, I did not know that this was a sequel, and yet I was able to enjoy the film entirely. If you accept going into it that woodland feral cannibals are a thing, which, you know, that's a thing in many other horror movies, so I don't know why you wouldn't be able to accept that. It's very understandable. It's a very good film. There's a lot more substance to this film than there is to a lot of other just splatter-type films like Meerkat's film Fear Farm Part 2. You could take the woman and her treatment as a metaphor for human trafficking, or for abusive relationships, or for the treatment of indigenous peoples. So there's a lot of substance to this movie, in addition to some truly scary, gory stuff. Anyway, I found this one on Amazon Prime. I do recommend it. I'm rewatching Season 1 of Invincible on Amazon Prime right now, but once I wrap that up, I'm going to have to look and see if the film Offspring and or Darlin are also available to check out some more of the series. So anyway, I am Carl. I recommend a film called The Woman, and that's what I watched this week. That brings us to the end of another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. As always, if you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to give us a like and a share. The biggest thing you can do to help us out is to share this video. Also, feel free to leave a comment about the films we discussed tonight, or maybe tell us about your own favorite, or maybe tell us about the worst horror film you've ever seen. If you would like to stay up to date on our latest videos, then please take a moment to stop by and check us out on social media and hit that subscribe button. You can find Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. And yes, that's Tales spelled with an A-I-L-S. Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat is just one of the shows you can find on the PBDC TV Broadcast Collective. If you're interested in horror, true crime, weird history, creepy stories, or unexplained events, then PBDC TV is sure to have something for you. You can find us online at pbdctv.com, and you can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. We will be back again next week with 2 more horror films, including one from the VHS era of horror, so be sure to drop back by next week. Once again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate all the support. Everyone stay safe and have a great week. We'll see you again soon. Good night, everybody.